After the huge battle at Cape Ecnomus, the Romans were finally free to land in Africa, and they did just that, with a spring in their step. The Carthaginians, meanwhile, decided to hunker down and defend their precious city of Carthage. So, the Romans strolled into Aspies, grabbed it like it was on sale, and went wild, looting the countryside like kids in a candy store. They took over 20,000 enslaved people and piled up so much treasure they could barely carry it. But just when they were about to celebrate, a message from the Senate came crashing down. "Send the treasure back home." One soldier, looking confused, muttered, "But I don't want to go home yet." His friend rolled his eyes. "Steve, they mean the treasure, not you." With a collective groan, they watched half the army pack up the loot and head back to Rome, leaving Regulus and his men behind to keep marching toward Carthage. According to the ancient writer Livy, they even ran into a dragon along the way. Sure, Livy might have exaggerated, but let's face it, it was probably just a gigantic lizard having a bad day. As the Romans continued to ransack everything in sight, the people of Carthage poured into their city, causing a huge traffic jam. They were panicking, and the town was so crowded people started to starve. One guy tried to calm everyone down, shouting, "Don't panic! Sure, you're all hungry, but look at me, I still have my lunch." The crowd, of course, booed and threw tomatoes. He dodged and laughed. "You're wasting food, and you wonder why you're hungry." Back in Carthage, things were looking pretty grim. The leaders finally decided to stop the Romans from tearing up their land. So, they marched out and set up camp on a hilly spot overlooking the Roman camp. Probably the worst place they could have chosen. Carthage was great at sea, but their army was full of mercenaries from all over, which sounds cool. However, it was like trying to get a bunch of strangers to play a team sport they'd never heard of. One mercenary grumbled, "I'm not getting paid enough for this." Another asked, "What'd he say? I don't know. I don't speak his language. Let's bail." And they went off. On top of that, Carthaginian generals habitually made weird choices. They had these giant, scary war elephants that could terrify any Roman, but they kept sticking them at the back of the army, where they were about as helpful as a rubber sword. They also had the best horsemen in the world, thanks to their buddies in Numidia, but instead of fighting on flat land where the horses could shine, they picked rough, rocky terrain where the horses and elephants were useless. So, the Romans sent them running when the Carthaginians tried to attack. As the Romans approached Carthage, Steve couldn't help but admire Regulus. "Wow, Regulus, we're so close to Carthage. You're incredible." Regulus smiled. "Yes, Steve, I know." But Steve looked a little down. "I wish I could be as awesome as you, Regulus." Regulus clapped him on the back. "Steve, you're awesome too." Everything was looking fantastic for Regulus. The victory was just around the corner, but then he realized that his year as consul was almost up, and if his replacement finished the job, they'd get all the glory and the naked statues. There was no way Regulus was going to let that happen, so he decided to act fast. "Hey, you there, Carthaginian kid," he said. "I want you to deliver a message to your leaders. I, Marcus Attalus Regulus, demand Carthage's total and unconditional surrender." The kid blinked, surprised. "Unconditional surrender? Can't you at least lay siege and starve us out first?" "Just deliver the message, punk," Regulus snapped. The kid ran off to deliver the message. "He demands your total surrender," he told the Carthaginian leaders. "What? At least lay siege and starve us first." "Yeah, that's what I said," the kid replied, shrugging. The Carthaginian leaders weren't about to give up that easily. "This Roman thinks we're done for," one leader said. "But we're not done, are we, boys?" "No," the other shouted. "We'll do what we always do. Hire someone else to fix our problems. Darren, bring in the Spartan." Regulus's harsh demands made the Carthaginians more determined than ever. They brought in Xanthippus, a mercenary from the land of Sparta, to help them out. And we all know what Spartans are like, tough as nails. Xanthippus arrived, took one look around, and facepalmed. "You idiots! Put the elephants before the army to smash into the Romans and stop fighting on rough, uneven terrain. Find a big, flat field so your cavalry can do their job. And what's this nonsense about giving a speech telling everyone they're going to die?" "I was just being honest," one of the leaders protested. "You're a politician," Xanthippus shot back. "Lie to the people." The crowd gasped in agreement. With Xanthippus in charge, the Carthaginian army was reformed and ready for battle. They met Regulus at the Battle of the Bagridas River. Now leading the charge, the elephants smashed into the Roman lines, causing chaos. The cavalry, finally able to move freely, outflanked the Roman infantry. Thanks to Xanthippus, the Carthaginians won a stunning victory. The Carthaginian leaders, jealous of Xanthippus' success, forced him to flee the city. As for Regulus, he was captured during the battle. Legend says he was brought before the Carthaginian council and they made him an offer. Well, Reggie, things aren't looking great for you now, are they? We beat you pretty bad, didn't we? Up yours, Punic pansies, Regulus spat. Now, Regulus, no need to be a sore loser. How about this? We'll send you back to Rome, and you convince the Senate to surrender to us. If you fail, you come back here and let us torture you to death. Deal? Deal, Regulus replied. You promise? I promise. Regulus returned to Rome. Hey guys, he greeted his fellow Romans. Regulus, we thought you were captured, they exclaimed. I was, but they sent me back to convince you to surrender. Should we surrender? They asked. No way, never surrender. Fight them with everything you've got, Regulus shouted. Anyway, I've got to go be tortured to death now. What? Why? It's part of the deal I made. Long story. Wait, Regulus, they called after him. No, it's cool, guys. I promised. Regulus, this is ancient times. We massacre entire populations and chop pets in half. You can break a promise. No, Tim, you never break a promise. That's going too far. And so, Regulus returned to Carthage, where he was tortured to death. But for keeping his promise, he became a symbol of Roman virtue. Meanwhile, after their defeat in Africa, the remaining Roman survivors were still stranded there, waiting for a rescue. So, the Romans sent their fleet to pick up their stranded troops and bring them home. They fought off a Carthaginian fleet, rescued the survivors, and returned to Sicily. Everything was going great until it wasn't. Sir, that cloud looks kinda angry, a soldier pointed out. Ha! Don't be a wimp, the Roman commander scoffed. We built a war fleet from scratch and took on the mighty Carthaginian Empire. Mother Nature, she's no match for us. I laugh in the face of Mother Nature, ha 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 ha. The soldiers joined in, laughing nervously. Like that, 284 ships, nearly 80% of the Roman fleet was destroyed. As many as 100,000 men drowned in this terrifying act of nature. Rome had never lost so many men in a single incident before. For any other nation, losing 100,000 men would have been the end. They'd rush to make peace and spend decades trying to recover. But Rome wasn't just any other nation. Known for its never-give-up attitude, Rome shrugged and said, well, guess we'll just build another fleet. In 3 months, they built 220 more ships and sailed out with their brand new war fleet. As one Roman poet said, the victor isn't victorious if the loser doesn't admit defeat. True to their stubborn nature, the Romans took a short break and returned to building yet another fleet. But for now, after all those disasters at sea, they decided to focus on the land campaign in Sicily. The Carthaginians, feeling pretty confident after their recent wins, tried to retake Panormus. But the Romans had a simple yet effective strategy. They threw stuff at the war elephants, scared them off, and stopped the Carthaginians' advance. With the path clear, they set their sights on the last Carthaginian stronghold, on the island of Lilybaeum. Lilybaeum was a fortress of a city. In 250 BC, the Romans laid siege to it, but the Carthaginians put up a fierce defense, and skilled blockade runners kept the city supplied. The siege dragged on for so long that it would last 9 years. As if that wasn't bad enough, the Carthaginians sent in their top military general, Hamilcar Barca, possibly the greatest general of the time. He had a clever campaign of guerrilla warfare behind Roman lines, and became a significant thorn in Rome's side for the rest of the war. With the siege of Lilybaeum deadlocked, and the new Roman fleet at sea, things were at a standstill. The Romans' consul, Claudius Pulcher, had an idea. He decided to shake things up by attacking the Carthaginian fleet at Drepana. But first, to predict their chances of victory, the Romans looked for signs from the gods. This usually involved observing the weather or inspecting some cow livers. Typical ancient religious stuff. In this case, Pulcher tried feeding some sacred chickens, but they wouldn't eat a single crumb. It's a terrible sign. Well, if they don't eat, let them drink, Pulcher said, tossing the chickens into the sea. Stupid chickens. We'll check the weather instead. Gods, give me a sign. Ignore that, Pulcher said quickly. Okay, how about this? We'll win if I can throw this piece of paper into that trash basket. He misses. All right, if I can stand here silently for 5 seconds, we'll win. Pulcher ignored all the wrong signs and went ahead with the battle. The Carthaginians, with their superior fleet, tore the Romans to pieces. It didn't help that the Romans had removed the corvus, a boarding device that was their secret weapon, making the battle a complete disaster. Pulcher was utterly disgraced. The victorious Carthaginian fleet intercepted a Roman supply fleet on its way to Lilybaeum. As the Carthaginians neared the Roman fleet, they noticed an incoming storm. They wisely decided to take shelter. The Romans, on the other hand, were as bold as ever. "Onward, men! Set sail! We've got to deliver these supplies pronto!" "But sir, those clouds, don't you think we should have learned our lesson by now?" "Yes, Brian, we should have, but we haven't." And so, another fleet and 50,000 men were lost to yet another storm. Disaster struck again. At this point, the Romans had captured most of Sicily and cornered the Carthaginian forces at Lilybaeum. But their constant disasters at sea were draining their resources. Without a strong Roman fleet, Rome couldn't win. Meanwhile, Hamilcar Barca was still causing trouble. By now, both sides had been fighting for 23 exhausting years. The Carthaginians, eager to return to trading and making money, saw the latest Roman disaster at sea and thought, "There's no way the Romans can come back from this. They can't possibly afford to build another fleet. They're done." Assuming the Romans would soon make peace, the Carthaginian government recalled a large part of their navy, leaving Hamilcar on his own. It looked like the victors were declaring themselves victorious. Meanwhile, the Romans were gearing up for round 5. They built another fleet, relying on patriotic donations from the upper classes to fund it, and once again, they set sail. The Carthaginian politicians made a half-hearted final attempt to support their forces in Sicily, with a poorly built fleet. But when the brand new Roman fleet caught them at the Battle of Agates, even without their secret weapon, the corvus, the Romans delivered the final blow. In 241 BC, the Carthaginian politicians told Hamilcar Barca that he was on his own and could make peace with the Romans if he wished. Hamilcar was stunned. He felt betrayed by the politicians. Some sources say he refused to even negotiate. Nevertheless, terms had to be drawn up. The treaty was extremely harsh, and by changing the terms at the last minute, the Romans enraged the Carthaginians. But still, one of the longest and deadliest wars of the time was finally over. The Romans had won. They achieved their goal of gaining Sicily. And even though it wasn't part of the peace deal, they took advantage of a weakened Carthage and grabbed Corsica and Sardinia. Roman expansion beyond the Italian peninsula had just begun. The Romans hoped that Carthage would now be forever under their thumb. But the harsh terms they imposed left a growing anger that would come back to haunt them. One day, Carthage would have its revenge. "That's nice, dear." "I'm serious, woman. Maybe not in my lifetime, but perhaps in his. My beautiful son, you were born into a momentous destiny. You shall be Rome's greatest enemy. You'll tear Rome limb from limb. You'll burn their pathetic city to the ground. You'll slaughter their people, men, women, and children. My child, you are vengeance." "Stop telling our baby he's vengeance." "But he is, Barbara. He's vengeance." "That may be true someday, but our son has a name for now, and you should call him that instead. His name is Hannibal."